In a small village nestled at the foot of a great mountain, there lived a young monk named Ananda. The village was quiet, with the rhythms of life dictated by the seasons and the sun. Ananda had grown up in the village and had always been curious about the world beyond it. His curiosity eventually led him to join a monastery high in the mountains, where he hoped to find answers to the questions that had long haunted his mind. Ananda was a diligent student, eager to learn and quick to grasp the teachings of the Buddha. He meditated daily, studied the scriptures, and performed his duties with devotion. Yet, despite his efforts, he found no peace. His mind was a tumultuous sea of thoughts, each wave crashing against the shores of his consciousness with relentless force. Every time he sat to meditate, his mind wandered. Thoughts of the past, worries about the future, and endless streams of what-ifs would flood his mind. He tried to focus on his breath, on the present moment, but his thoughts always pulled him away. It was as if his mind was a forest, thick with trees of doubt and vines of worry that grew denser the more he tried to clear a path through them. One day, overwhelmed by the ceaseless chatter in his mind, Ananda decided to seek the counsel of the abbot, an old monk revered for his wisdom and tranquility. The abbot lived in a small hut on the edge of the monastery grounds, surrounded by a garden of blooming lotuses. The sight of the serene flowers, floating peacefully on the surface of a pond, always brought a fleeting sense of calm to Ananda's troubled heart. The abbot welcomed Ananda with a gentle smile and invited him to sit. After a moment of silence, the abbot asked, "What troubles you, Ananda?" Ananda hesitated, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he spoke, "Master, I try to follow the teachings. I meditate, study, and live according to the precepts, but my mind is never at rest. I am constantly overthinking. My thoughts race from one thing to another, and I cannot find peace. What should I do?" The abbot nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. "Overthinking is like a forest that grows within the mind," he said. "The more you struggle against it, the denser it becomes. But there is a way out. It requires patience, practice, and understanding." The abbot paused, then continued, "Tomorrow, at dawn, I want you to go into the forest on the other side of the mountain. There, you will find a small clearing where you can meditate. Stay there until you find the peace you seek." Ananda bowed and thanked the abbot for his guidance. The next morning, before the first light of day, he set out for the forest. The path was steep and narrow, winding through dense woods. The further he went, the thicker the forest became, until he was surrounded by towering trees and tangled underbrush. The air was cool and damp, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. After hours of walking, Ananda finally reached the clearing the abbot had mentioned. It was a small, open space, surrounded by ancient trees whose roots twisted through the earth like the threads of an intricate tapestry. In the center of the clearing was a large flat rock, perfect for sitting. Ananda settled himself on the rock and closed his eyes, focusing on his breath as he had been taught. But as soon as he did, his mind began to wander. Thoughts about his journey, worries about his life in the village, and doubts about his spiritual path all crowded his mind. He tried to push them away, but the more he resisted, the stronger they became. Hours passed, and Ananda's frustration grew. The peaceful forest around him seemed to mock his inner turmoil. He opened his eyes and looked around, searching for some sign, some clue as to what he was supposed to do. But all he saw were trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Then, in the distance, he noticed something unusual. There was a small trail leading deeper into the forest, almost hidden by the thick undergrowth. Curious, Ananda decided to follow it. The trail was narrow and overgrown, and he had to push his way through the vines and branches that blocked his path. But he felt a strange pull, as if something was guiding him. After some time, the trail opened into another clearing, even smaller than the first. In the center of this clearing stood an old, gnarled tree. Its bark was twisted and knotted, and its branches stretched out like the arms of a weary traveler. At the base of the tree, nestled among its roots, was a small, moss-covered stone. It was shaped like a lotus, its petals worn smooth by time. Ananda approached the stone and sat down before it. As he did, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He closed his eyes and began to meditate again. This time, instead of trying to force his thoughts away, he simply observed them. He watched as they rose and fell, like waves on the surface of a vast ocean. He did not judge them or try to control them, he just let them be. As he sat in stillness, something began to change. The thoughts that had once seemed so overwhelming began to lose their power. They became like leaves floating on the surface of a river, carried along by the current but no longer obstructing the flow of his mind. He realized that the thoughts themselves were not the problem, it was his attachment to them, his desire to control them, that caused his suffering. With this realization, Ananda felt a deep sense of peace. The forest around him seemed to come alive, the trees whispering secrets of ancient wisdom. He understood now that the mind is like a forest, with countless thoughts growing wild and free. Trying to cut them down or control them only causes more confusion. But by simply observing them, by letting them grow and fade naturally, one can find a path through the forest and reach a place of stillness and clarity. Ananda stayed in the clearing for several days, meditating and contemplating what he had learned. He no longer fought against his thoughts but allowed them to come and go as they pleased. He found that by doing so, his mind became clearer, his heart lighter. The overthinking that had once plagued him began to dissolve, replaced by a deep, abiding peace. When Ananda finally returned to the monastery, he sought out the abbot to share what he had experienced. The abbot listened with a knowing smile and said, "The forest of the mind is vast and full of many paths. You have learned that the way through is not by force, but by understanding. Continue to cultivate this wisdom, and you will find the peace you seek." Ananda bowed deeply, filled with gratitude. He returned to his daily practice with a renewed sense of purpose, no longer troubled by the thoughts that once consumed him. Instead, he walked the path of mindfulness, knowing that true peace comes not from controlling the mind, but from understanding its nature. Years passed, and Ananda became known as a wise and compassionate teacher. He often told the story of his journey into the forest to his students, guiding them to see that overthinking is like the trees in a forest, dense and overwhelming at first, but ultimately harmless if one learns to navigate them with mindfulness and understanding. And so, in the quiet village at the foot of the great mountain, the teachings of Ananda spread, bringing peace to those who, like him, had once been lost in the forest of their own thoughts.